Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at the work of Paul Kirchner. Paul's work is something I've been familiar with from old school days of heavy metal from the Bus. This is someone I've been a fan of for a long time, but mostly just because of this strip. In the last year or so, I became a bigger fan of Kirchner's work once I realized there was more of it out there when Matt King, our buddy from Tales to Enlighten, when he told me that I should check out more of Paul's work, especially Murder by Remote Control, because Matt was pointing out the similarities, stylistic similarities between this book and some of what's in Strange Death, with the black and white realistic artwork and some of the less conventional page layouts like this type of thing here. And he suggested that he thinks I would really dig Paul's work. I said, oh man, I've always been a fan of the Bus, but I didn't know he had anything else. I knew that these two collections I was kind of waiting to buy on Amazon. It's like, no man, you got to check out Dope Rider, this book here, and all of his other stuff. It's really good. So yeah, okay, I'll put it on the list. But then I luckily ran into Paul. He had a table at Mocha, and so I ran over immediately. It was like, oh my god, I love your stuff, and kind of geeked out for a bit, and explained to him that I had worked on Strange Death and that someone had told me that they had seen similarities before our work. And we struck up a great conversation, and I said, hey, give me all your stuff. I'll buy all of it. Paul was kind and did sketches in all of the books. I'm not sure where the sketch is at in this book. I think it's a couple pages in. Yeah, so he did sketches in all of my work, and we sat there and just talked about art for a while and had a really nice time. And hopefully we'll get to talk to Paul as well. But this is a collection of his short work, and it's really nice. I wanted to start with this one because it is so comprehensive in terms of like his career as a comic artist, spanning from 1974 to 2014. And then in the back there's a nice essay by Paul about his time as a comic artist, and it was really quite fascinating to me because some of the things I assumed about him based on his work and the publications he's been in, High Times, some porno magazines. I thought he was like pretty underground, but that's not the case. So anyways, here you get a look at some more of his beautiful black and white work, really just like solid classic designs, fantastic rendering, and then as I'm familiar with his work from the Bus, a sense of surreality throughout the whole thing. So just a beautiful book. These are beautifully produced. This is from Tanibus Editions. I'm not sure if that's his own company or someone else, but he was just set up at his own table. So again, really nice to meet him. Really like this opening strip here, just a one page. They came from Uranus, and this is the type of stuff I'm talking about, where I thought of him as a pretty edgy artist, but then meeting him and reading the back of the book, it doesn't seem so much like that. But there's some really funny stuff on here. They're saying that this war kicked off. This is the type of sense of humor that Paul has in his work. The war kicked off because the literal translation of the phonetics of our word greeting actually comes off in Uranian as your mother seeks out the company of yaks in heat. Yeah, just like funny little details in the writing like that. And then you can see the art is amazing, like this big gun dick Mickey Mouse thing and these melted Mickey Mouse alien invaders. Then we get a fair selection of Dope Rider stories in here. These are the original Dope Rider pieces that Paul had produced for High Times magazine. So these are, 1975 is this one. And again, you'll see this just really awesome, crazy layouts, really ahead of their time. Beautiful coloration, cool use of all of these like psychedelics and stuff, beautiful coloring. Paul's a real master of like old school comic coloring. He talks about that in the back, cutting out ruby lith tones and things like that. So he really knows how to work with, one or two colors over top of realistic art, nice flat coloring. And in reproduction knows what those colors should look like, because this is someone getting their own art prepared for reproduction. You can see that the colors are tamed down as they would have been when they were originally printed on a newsprint. Like the reds aren't all the way intense red always, there's some desaturation to them. So this is a great example also of what I think, work from earlier should look like when it's printed. beautiful reproduction of the black and white line art. I'm assuming, like Paul probably had or has all the assets for this still. So he has access to good line art scans and things like that. But then with the coloring as well, the coloring is handled really well. So absolutely impeccable reproduction on these books. And you can see like this kind of psychedelic poster art design working its way into things. Dope Rider's a skeleton that's just always kind of high. The stories are always very surreal. There's a lot of wordplay in them, things like that, So it seems when you're reading it, it seems like this is definitely made by someone who's under the influence of drugs, someone who's enjoying that associative state. But from the essay in the back, Kirchner says that it sounds like he's never smoked marijuana, or at least when he got started, that when he was doing this stuff, that drugs and psychedelics weren't a part of it. And the same thing goes for some of the other work that I'll show you as well. Here you get some really clever space play. So using the ambiguity of perspective to make it look like both we're looking down on the top of the building and the characters on the outside, and then seeing the character from the inside of here we're seeing this as the ceiling, and this is a character trapped inside, and then here we are looking down and we're seeing the character from the outside. So that kind of fun space play here. And he says, in jail time, in time truth, in truth freedom. So there's a nice little threefold wordplay there, and he uses that to escape. He's like, he moves himself out of time basically. And then to be locked up for possession of a key, weird. So referring to marijuana, I think, is the key. But again, it's particularly strange that this is supposedly done without having smoked or anything like that, because it's such a celebration of marijuana. But it's like, okay, I guess it was a job that he took. Here's some of his own fantasy art. Just get a sense of how he's applying those skills in other places. So very kind of Moebius, Anki Bilal influence, I would imagine, with all the cross-hatching and rendering kind of the old buildings, very heavy metal. And obviously he was working for heavy metal with the bus. Here's another piece called The Hive. I really, really like this one. The art on this one's gorgeous. This machinery, very, very, before Gerhard would work on Cerebus, reminiscent of what Gerhard would do on Cerebus, even some of the color palette. So I think, Paul Kirchner is someone who should have had a way bigger impact on the industry than he has. And I think partially that's just because he didn't do much. He talks about spending, in the essay in the back, he talks about spending 30 some odd years just working, in a more kind of corporate advertising commercial position. Here's you see he has some real stylistic variety even early on in his career, and that carries across some of the books that I've got. But this more cartoony thing, I actually have to cover up a couple of these panels because they're pretty lewd. But this looks like it was done probably for one of the Screw magazines. So here you get these covers that he was doing for what you can see in like the 70s would have been a pretty, like late 70s. This is a pretty edgy porno magazine. It looks like it in New York's Best Hookers. Special Guide to Sex in the City, Bisexuality for Beginners, Sodomy, Fetish Films. The cover here is from one of these. So you can see that he was working in the underground. But again, according to the back of the book, he still just finds pornography kind of distasteful. It's not really his thing, but these were just jobs. So it's so funny because I think that's probably what he got associated with early on, was the Dope Rider thing, especially other than the bus and the heavy metal. I'm sure in New York he was probably known for the Screw covers. So it's an interesting thing. Here's just some more of his layouts. Really like the layouts here. Another short story. This is a guy that's so cool, he just gets taken away on a chariot of cool, basically. Here's some more just awesome kind of multicultural psychedelia that you get in Kirchner's work. He's drawing from a lot of different places, you can tell, in his artwork as well, which I really, really appreciate. Really like this solarization technique here. I'm more used to seeing that in manga, but with the psychedelics, that would have been a big technique that they would have seen in film. This story is just obviously a short story about being an OCD perfectionist, which, given Kirchner's work, I can imagine that he has some of this in him, but just that this thing spilled over and it becomes so monstrous. And again, I mean, come on. Do I have to explain how cool the art is? You can see it. This is another spread that I really like. Just with this beast like tossing these things at these characters. It's an awful firing squad. Some apocalyptic imagery, kind of with the deadpan nature of the bus to it. I love this shot here of the lady walking her dog. Just amazing compositions, amazing spotting of blacks, and then amazing use of gray as the mid-tone to stitch it all together. Perfect compositions. And so here you go into this essay that he has about himself with a lot of little like extras of his art, some practice inking that he was doing in his portfolio, poster that he had up, all kinds of cool stuff. About drugs, he was saying one of the reasons that he didn't do drugs is because he was scared of doing them. A few months later, when I was at Woodstock, a hippie who looked through my sketchbook told me, "You already draw the things I see or you already draw the things I take drugs hoping to see." So he always felt like that he would not be wise to take drugs because he already had a really great imagination, and that's why I stayed away from them until I was in my 30s. I didn't drink, I didn't use marijuana, any of that kind of stuff until I was in my 30s because I felt like my mind was so on fire anyways, I didn't need to. So I get it, and I feel sympathy to that, that you can produce all this stuff. Why would you need to do that? Also, a list of just like influences and people that he's worked directly with, people that he apprenticed with is just some real legends. Wally Wood, Neil Adams, Dick Giordano, Tex Blaisdell, just all these amazing mentors that he had, people that he assisted for, so you could see where the skill comes from. Hopefully we'll get to interview Paul and ask him about those people. He describes here a really interesting process for this story here that he did. This was something that was published in Creepy in 1976. Wally Wood ditched the page layouts, and Paul Kirchner found reference photos in his large collection of movie stills, which then he traced with the Artograph, which was a typical projector that they were using back then for photorealist strips, and then Wood polished up the drawings. The dramatic lighting in the stills, along with John Severin's superb inking, gives the story a look unlike anything else that Woody did. So this is really interesting because you have Wally Wood basically doing the layouts, then you have Kirchner doing the tracing and creating the general composition, then you have Wally Wood polishing up the drawings, and John Severin inking it. So that's a hell of a collaboration there. Picture of Wally Wood with a machine gun. Just all kinds of cool stuff back here. This here is inked by Russ Heath. So again, you're just talking about kind of legends of the field that Paul Kirchner got to work with and learn from and collaborate with. So inked by Russ Heath, and according to the note by Paul Kirchner, this was inked entirely with the brush, including the lettering, which I can believe all of this is done with the brush, but man, that's really baffling to think about the lettering. Yeah, and then you get some more like reproduced art here, and also some scans of some original art. So you can see that he does have some kind of access to the original art, which is why it looks so nice throughout the book. So you get a little mini artist edition, some extras here at the end that just look like random pages from some things here and there. So this is a really robust book, a really deep dive into the rest of Kirchner's career. And I think having this kind of span of what his career before I jumped into everything else, including his much more cartoony Hieronymus and Bosch, which we'll take a look at in a minute. This was a really good kind of, not introductory text because I already knew the artist, but really fleshing out what Paul Kirchner's place in comics is, and really gives you a look at if he would have, stuck around and been active for a 30-year period, then his contributions, this is probably someone we'd be talking about in terms of Wally Wood and Neil Adams, and those kind of real tastemaker people. That's the impression I get, because this stuff is so stunning. But he went and worked a regular job for 30 years and is now, it seems like, back working on comics and having a lot of fun, enjoying returning to, where he started. So it was really, like I said, it was really cool to meet Paul, and really cool to get to see this book and get an overview of his career. Next up, we have more Dope Rider, and Awaiting the Collapse, you get the original Dope Rider strips from the early High Times magazines collected. Between 2015 and 2020, Kirchner returned to the Dope Rider character and was doing more strips for High Times magazine again, and those are all collected in this book, A Fistful of Delirium. So again, beautifully produced book, really nice hardcover. Impeccable reproduction, all of the stuff that I was talking. We got another sketch in this one. All the stuff that I was talking about how the comics are produced with like the perfect reproduction of the line work, nice solid black, and then largely flat coloring was part of the style of the earlier works, persists in the later ones. You can tell that Kirchner's now coloring with computer colors, but the aesthetic's the same. And you'll get some gradients here and there, but very, very minimal. Usually just one color, sometimes like one color and a shadow, and very rarely like one color, a shadow, and a highlight. But that's about it usually. And I really, really like that look, especially for Kirchner's work. And again, it kind of sets a standard for like the types of colors I would like to see in reprints of older materials, where they stick to the old colors, but they're properly desaturated. So basically that's what this book is. I'll just go through and show a couple. These are all like one-off strips, except for one 3-page, 4-page origin story of Dope Rider at the end of the book, so that you can tell what these are. These are just one-page things for the High Times magazine, and then throughout the book there's kind of like a flip book animated sequence of Dope Rider coming up out of the smoke and then going and having a psychedelic journey. So each one of these is just like a little one-page strip with a punchline to it. Like here you have the characters get pulled over, and they do a Jedi mind trick on the police here, telling them this is not the drugs you were looking for. And then here this character says, "I can't believe that cop fell for your doobie one Kenobi routine. The farce can have a strong influence on the weak-minded." So that's pretty much it. And then there's always at the end, he's got an armadillo, a pet armadillo, that makes like some extra little comment punchline joke there. So that's pretty much what they are. There's funny stuff all throughout. A lot of cool visuals. Like here you have this like Hindu armadillo god thing. I apologize ahead of time to Tori, because I know she's going to be editing this, and Tori hates armadillos. She got chased by an armadillo when she was a young child and forever hates armadillos. So baby, I love you. Here's what an armadillo looks like when it gets high on edibles. So I hope you enjoy that. Thank you for editing the videos. Here's another really cool psychedelic moment. You get him going up to like the ganja tree, basically the eternal mother of marijuana, the universal ganja tree, and you get this very like Jack Kirby kind of superhero design, but with all this like peace, love, happiness, all these world religions and colors on him. So I really like that mixture of kind of a Jack Kirby design, with this stuff up here with this other kind of symbolism from different world religions. You got the Ankh, you got the yin yang symbol, the peace sign, infinity symbol, burning heart, moon and sun, pyramids, all this different kind of stuff. So I think that's really funny, his ability to combine designs. And then you get a sense of Kirchner's ability to work both in more naturalistic colors and the more like intense psychedelic colors. Right here, I just had to laugh because he's basically has someone gets too high, Dope Rider gets too high, and is playing very experimental music. So it's got a doobie wooby beat, yippee-ki-yay, heavy metal, hallelujah, country music, Muppets all mixed together. And he says, no, some genres were never meant to coexist. But I disagree. This is actually a very good visual representation of my preferred style of music. Probably my favorite artist of all time, whether it be visual or music or whatever, is Mike Patton. And I think him and his early band, Mr. Bungle especially, perfected this aesthetic, and it's one of my favorite types of music. So I disagree with Dilly here. This looks like the most awesome song I could imagine. Here's some more, just showing you some of the cool psychedelic Kirchner art in this book. here you basically get a peek at the underworkings of reality, so the eldritch gods behind everything, and I think that's a pretty good Lovecraftian gnarl there. This strip here is a real fun fourth wall break where they get high enough to where they're getting paranoid and feel like they're being watched. And so Dope Rider like steps out of the story, steps out of the frame, and comes and breaks the fourth wall and looks at us. Actually, I'm surprised that with all the fourth wall breaking, that there's still this here. I think you could have used the page as the border, but this also looks like he's peeking past a wall. So it's a very effective composition, and then rides back into the story. And then the punchline is they're like, well, they're watching us, so we better moon them. And then this like saggy old man ass, and then the pelvic bone. I just think that whole strip is really funny on the fourth wall break. And then I also like this kind of fourth wall break that Kirchner does here, where he's going through and having, you know, like the Alice in Wonderland and the tarot cards and the puppet show and all that. And basically this is an ad where he's saying, absolutely, I do whatever I feel like and say whatever I want. Always, always buy Paul Kirchner's books. Who's Paul Kirchner? I don't know. I've never heard of him, so why do you say that? So I like that, you know, he's obviously getting towards the end of what will be, unless he kept doing it and there was another Dope Rider collection coming, I'm not sure. There's nothing in the book that says, but obviously that's getting right to the end of his run on High Times. There's, I think, as far as I can tell, there's one more strip after that, and then the 4-page origin story here, and that's it. That's it for the book. So I'm assuming Kirchner's coming to the end of his run on High Times, and he's encouraging the customer base to go buy his books and putting that into like a funny little story with a funny joke. So I really appreciate that. I think there's a great sense of humor on display all throughout. And, you know, as you can see up all of these Kirchner books that I'm flipping through, just amazing art, amazing line work, amazing coloring and all that. So continuing to enjoy these. Hieronymus and Bosch is an interesting one for, well, first off, just look at this beautiful, like, it's got this leather binding on the side here, which is really nice for this edition about hell. I'm hoping this is kind of what the leather that's on the Abolition of Man hardcover will look like. I think that's the one we got, something similar to that. But anyways, this is an interesting one because art-wise, there's much more cartooning going on in here. You can see the art here is a very cartoony style compared to Kirchner's other more like Hal Foster, Brian Boland influenced vein of work that I'm familiar with all of his other stuff. So that's fun to see, but the format's the same where it's a bunch of like one-page gag strips. I'm not sure if this series of gag strips appeared in some other publication. Like I know that the Dope Rider stuff, you know, was published in High Times. There were the covers that were done for the underground like porno magazines in the 70s. This is from 2018, and it doesn't say anything in here that suggests it was published somewhere else first. So this seems to be just for this collection only, but I'm not sure. These don't seem like the kind of thing you just do leading to a collection. It seems like the kind of things that you would do, you know, coming out once a month or once a week or something. So I'm assuming these were collected somewhere else. Or not collected, but released somewhere else one at a time, but I'm not sure. I could be wrong. So Kirchner is very comfortable in that format. You get it in the Bush, you get it in Dope Rider, all those things. This one's fun. You get the map in the front because it kind of has like this medieval fantasy vibes to everything that's going on because we got a character in hell. So nothingness, and then all of these. You get a lot of these things show up, if not all of them. I think all of these show up in the gag somewhere. So he's just turned this into a map. But commercial district, a health club, just different things like that. So that's fun to look at. And then the opening sequence seems like if these were things that were made for like once a week or once a month, then Kirchner has gone and given an origin story for how Hieronymus wound up in hell. So we get Hieronymus here has obviously drank the holy wine, passed out on the altar, gets kicked out of church, sexually assaults a lady who's sexually assaulting some melons, and then steals this toy from a kid. And the kid's name is Bosch, so that's where you get the Hieronymus and Bosch. Obviously, given that this is a set of kind of wild, fantastical hellscape tortures that are going to come in this book, Kirchner's paying tribute to the artist Hieronymus Bosch, who painted all these funny hellscape torture scenes in his paintings, so that's fun. But anyways, you get Bosch here is the wooden ducky roller toy that Hieronymus has stolen. Hieronymus slips on what I think is poop and crashes into a wall and dies. And this sequence here where it's like, here's the death, and then here's the spirit continuing to fall into nothing, I think is a really fun just visual conceit. And then you start to get a sense throughout that opening sequence, but especially here, where now you go into the 9-panel grid that the rest of the stories are going to take. So that's like a clever visual transition as well, is now you've transitioned into the format that the majority of the stories are going to take. And the format of like a character trying to accomplish something and it going like 180 against his wishes, like here, kicking it, not realizing he's holding a string, so it bangs him in the head. That kind of like Charlie Brown loser mentality is basically the mechanism for each of the jokes. So it's one mechanism that gets played out over and over, as you would with this type of strip. So I'm just going to show some of the ones that landed for me that I thought were funny, that are good little tortures. Here you have Hieronymus trying to grow up a tree to get the fruit. Cuts though, goes through the effort to cut the whole thing down, and then the fruit just floats. So that would be pretty torturous. They're just obviously he's in hell, and they're coming up with all these different ways to make it miserable. Here thinking, oh my God, the light's coming to get me, the angels are going to save me, and they're just laughing, viewing the suffering of the damned. It's just disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. Here you get really the Charlie Brown thing taken to the closest extreme you would get to actual Charlie Brown, where you have Hieronymus run up playing soccer. It gets ready to really lay in and kick this ball, and this demon sees what's going on and you can see his little rays here, transmorgifies it into a rock, and Hieronymus hits the rock, and then the demon steals the ball. That's real funny. All the like weird little demon peepees everywhere are funny. Like obviously Kirchner is a phenomenal cartoonist as well as a realist, and it's really fun to see those two skills within someone's body of work. Here you see that obviously Kirchner is also aware of the Doré prints, talking about Dante's Inferno. You have the tier where there's all the people kind of drilled into the ground, pounded into the ground, and Hieronymus gets pounded in on the pogo stick there. And then here's another one where he tries to go, this is the transmogrifier demon playing tricks again. He goes up to hand this lady an apple, and it's really a piece of poop, and then the demons over there playing. So just like a lot of little funny subversions of an attempt like this. Some like corporate type of hell too, like these jobs where you could do a job easier, but you have a dumbass boss who just or corporate policy or something like that makes everything harder. So it's like, we don't allow multi-filament mops on our floor. You have to use one that only has one string on it. And so here, you can't do your job as well. Just those kind of mundane tears as well that honestly, I mean, there's plenty of being burnt on fire is pretty awful, but I think a lot of us experience some pretty hellish tortures here with our jobs anyways. I'm pretty lucky I don't have torturous job anymore, but I have had those, so that's very familiar. There's also some strips that don't fit into this format. There's a different vertical format that has chains around it here. This was my favorite one of those, where there's an exit and he sees, oh, there's a bridge, I can get out of it, and he sneaks, and it's all just an optical illusion where they've actually made a triangular piece with diminishing size of the boards. Here you can see the boards getting smaller to create the illusion of perspective, and then putting this gate up here to force you to see it from the angle you need to see for the illusion to work. It's like the drawing actually is really well constructed to show what the illusion would have to look like. So that was fun, cruel, a little piece in there. And then at the end you get this extra bit that's a letter from Satan, and he's saying that God himself has gone rather squishy. He now takes into account such factors as bad parenting, socioeconomic disadvantage, falling in with the wrong crowd, diminished capacity, and oppositional defiance disorder. Ironically, the last one is what landed me here. So Satan's saying that really apologizing for the medieval look of the book, but that's where they got most of the people. And then now God is turning into a softie and listening to human morality. The current morals of the day, there's not as many people being sent to hell because we could basically blame it on all these other factors other than just our own choosing to succumb to those factors or not. So I thought that was a pretty funny little thing. And then he goes on to say a little bit more about like the Hieronymus fellow. So a really enjoyable addition to Paul's body of work, and I think one that shows a different side of his cartooning abilities, even though the way he structures his work is pretty similar in this, and I think that's really cool. And last but definitely not least, we have Paul Kirchner's The Bus. This is put out in 2 volumes. The first volume collects the stuff that probably brought most of us to Kirchner's work in the first place, which is his strip The Bus that ran in heavy metal. And then in volume 2, once he realized that there was this resurgence of interest in his work, and he started collecting all of his older stuff, he's been making new The Bus stories as well. These are all pretty, like with most of Kirchner's work that's written by himself, it's kind of 1-page, 2-page gag strips. Here you can see, it's all stories about a guy getting onto a bus, and there's kind of variations on a theme where it's like there's things in the bus, or there's paying for the bus, there's getting off the bus, there's being in the bus, waiting for the bus. And then and like in this one, you basically get almost like a National Geographic description of the life of buses or things. I'm sure anyone that has read older heavy metal has seen these and enjoy these, and it's really nice to have them all in one collection, really well printed. So I just kind of highlighted some of my favorite ones in here, like this one here where each character on the bus is being advertised to individually, and then you get the commuter is what he's called, this kind of generic commuter guy that's in most of the strips, and he's kind of thrown under the bus by having the constipated ad, and so anyone on the bus would know that he's constipated. Those are kind of the surreal little gags that are played in the bus. And I quite like this idea, especially because I think these were being done in the 70s and 80s, that this is very much a world that we're facing now with targeted ads. We'll just go ahead and flip to one other one. Here you get a sense of the kind of visual trickery that Paul Kirchner plays, where he's just playing with the perspective tricks almost that you can get when you're working with the flat picture plane. So you have a character being too loud on the bus, and the guy tries to open the window, and it slides the character's head over because he's actually, just flattened down on the picture plane. So there's a lot of play with picture plane and perspective and trickery to get a general surreal sense. That seems to be core for most of Kirchner's work. In The Bus 2, there were, for some reason, I was just tagging more of them, even though I like both of them equally. Here he's basically has a strip explaining why the bus came back in like surreal terms, and like this is pretty funny to me. The original commuter actor is now much older. He's it's been a while since the bus happened, so we've got his son playing the role. Here's one that I really like because it just made me feel so claustrophobic, where the bus is kind of following all of these instructions and gets trapped in a maze. So there's a lot of that dreamlike imagery in here. This is another one that plays with perspective very well, where the character stays the same size even as he moves back, the diminishing size that's implied by things moving back towards a vanishing point, and then as he comes forward, he starts to shrink as the things around him get bigger. So just they're fun. They're surreal little fun pieces. This is another one that I really enjoyed the visuals of. It also kind of gives a sense of how diverse Kirchner has to be, coming up with so many of these ideas that he's constantly have to be searching around in reality for new ideas. And here you can imagine him being out in public and seeing this guy with a lot of tattoos and mentally imagining all that stuff coming to life, and then being like, oh, that would be a great bus story. So that's just really fun as this character breaks apart into his tattoos. So these are, like I said, the things that brought me to Kirchner's are obviously the like pretty clean line cartooning style filled in with the really steady cross hatching is something that obviously appeals to me, the style that I've employed a lot. So it immediately always drew my eye and caught me in the heavy metal. These were always some of my favorite things in heavy metal. And then the surrealism and the idea of visual puns and trickery of the two-dimensional picture plane, those are all just things that it really, are things that I enjoy in art as well. So really huge fan of this series. Really glad that I got to run into Paul at MoCA and grab all of his work. These are things that I've wanted for quite a while and just had on my wait lists, and to be able to get the whole collection is great, and I really look forward to seeing what else he does. So everyone definitely go out, I'll put a link where you can get copies of all of these things. I think we're really lucky to have an artist this great who stepped out of comics come back and be enjoying working in comics again. So we should definitely all go support what Paul Kirchner is doing, and hopefully we'll get a lot more of his work in the future.
Like and subscribe and hit the bell, please, so Carson can finish reading his books and let me go home.